Imagine this. After a long, exhausting day at work, you finally hit the hay, looking forward to a restful night's sleep. But the next morning, you don't wake up. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Yet you remain in a deep slumber, completely unaware of the passing time. You're not dead, just sleeping for years, even decades. Your family, bewildered and worried, continues to care for you, feeding you, talking to you, hoping for a miracle to wake you up. They watch as years slip by, witnessing milestones and moments without you by their side. They celebrate, they mourn, they cry, and through it all you remain in your eternal sleep, shedding tears of your own for the loved ones you've lost. But as time marches on, a question lingers. What happens to your body after years of uninterrupted sleep? What becomes of you, trapped in an endless slumber, while the world moves on around you? The answer might surprise you. In the late 1800s, on a small island named Okno, off the eastern coast of Sweden, lived 14-year-old Carolina Olsson with her family. Carolina had a big family, including her parents and 5 brothers. They were like many other families on the island, making a living through farming and fishing. Life on the island was secluded from the rest of the world, and Carolina Olsson would have remained unknown if not for a strange event that occurred when she was young. This is the true story of the Sleeping Beauty of Okno. It all began on February 18, 1876, as Carolina was making her way back home to her village. She was crossing a frozen river when she tripped and banged her head, giving herself a nasty toothache, but she managed to make it back home safely to her humble cottage. Despite having a sore face and a throbbing toothache, Carolina seemed all right at first glance, but as time passed, her toothache worsened, and she started getting terrible headaches, unlike anything she'd ever experienced before. Her father, a local fisherman, and her mother began to suspect something strange was going on, like witchcraft or something. In those days, back in 1876, people were superstitious, especially in the isolated village of Okno. With no doctors nearby and their finances tight, Carolina's family felt helpless. So they decided to let her rest and see how things turned out the next day. Little did they know, Carolina wouldn't wake up for decades. She drifted off to sleep at just 14 years old and didn't return to the waking world until she was 46. Carolina's parents were desperate to wake her up, but back in those days, they couldn't afford a doctor. So they tried everything they could think of to bring her back to consciousness. They resorted to some pretty extreme methods, like holding a hot flame against her skin, and even pricking her with needles, starting from her body, and eventually even under her fingernails. But no matter what they tried, Carolina remained fast asleep. After a few days passed without any sign of Carolina waking up, her parents knew they needed medical help. In the meantime, they began force-feeding her 2 glasses of milk and sugar every day, hoping it might help somehow. Finally, when they were able to get a doctor to come and take a look at her, he couldn't quite figure out what was wrong. He said she was in some sort of coma, but why she was in a coma was a mystery. Hello everyone, just a quick break from the video to say if you made it this far, there must be something you like. So please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps me out, it helps the channel out, and if you don't like what you're watching, leave a dislike, tell me what went wrong so I can improve. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, Carolina continued to sleep. The doctor kept track of her case and even reached out to other medical experts for help. Some of them traveled all the way to the secluded island to see Carolina for themselves. They noticed something strange. Despite being asleep for so long, her hair and fingernails hadn't grown at all. And despite only drinking those 2 glasses of milk a day, she hadn't really lost any weight. In fact, she seemed to be in surprisingly good shape. It was like Carolina was in some kind of suspended animation, frozen in time. In July of 1882, a full 6 years after Carolina slipped into her mysterious slumber, she was still sleeping soundly. Her worried parents, feeling the weight of their concern, decided to have her hospitalized in the city. Doctors there tried everything they could think of to wake her up. even resorting to electroshock therapy, but nothing seemed to work. Frustrated, the doctors threw up their hands and gave her a diagnosis of dementia paralytica, a severe neuropsychiatric disorder also known as general paralysis of the insane. But truth be told, nobody could say for sure if that was really what was wrong with her. The family was left with little choice but to wait and hope for the best. Years passed by, seasons changed, and the world kept on evolving around them. Family members came and went, and through it all, Carolina continued to sleep. Sometimes she would moan or toss and turn, even sleepwalk, or mumble in her sleep, but she never fully woke up. In 1907, Carolina surprisingly showed a reaction to the outside world when her brother passed away. Even then, she cried, though she remained in her strange sleeping state. Sadly, Carolina's mother also passed away during this time, and the family hired a full-time nurse for her. The nurse started to notice some strange things, like how Carolina's hair always seemed clean and never grew, and how her nails stayed the same length. She also found it odd that sometimes, when she left and returned, pieces of candy she had brought would mysteriously disappear. Despite her suspicions, Carolina never stirred from her slumber, no matter what anyone tried. After years of this strange ordeal, it became increasingly apparent that Carolina wasn't aging normally. She looked much younger than she should have, as if her whole metabolism had been slowed down by her mysterious sleep. And so, this extraordinary tale continued for an astounding 32 years, until that remarkable day arrived. On April 3, 1908, Carolina's eyes fluttered open, and she sat up in bed, tears streaming down her face. The nurse, accustomed to Carolina's sleepwalking, hurried into the room, expecting the usual, but what she found astonished her. Carolina was wide awake, looking around the room in confusion. The family rushed to her bedside, but Carolina didn't recognize her now-grown brothers. She wasn't in a state of shock or panic. Instead, she seemed disoriented. In the days that followed, she spoke little and appeared sensitive to sunlight, almost as if it caused her pain. But gradually, with some effort, she began to communicate again. During questioning, Carolina revealed that she had no memory of anything since falling into her long sleep, save for fragmented dreams and nightmares. Doctors, puzzled by her case, examined her closely. Despite spending decades bedridden, she showed no negative effects. Despite technically being in her late 40s, she looked remarkably youthful, more like someone in their early 20s. Psychiatrists conducted mental tests and were amazed to find that Carolina retained all her cognitive abilities and intelligence. However, she struggled to adapt to a world that had changed so much during her slumber. Word quickly spread about what the media dubbed as the Sleeping Beauty of Okno, and Carolina soon found herself a minor celebrity. But of course, there were doubters. How could a woman sleep for over 3 decades without any visible effects? And surviving on just 2 glasses of sweetened milk a day seemed too unbelievable. Some speculated that her family was in on it, orchestrating a scheme to keep her hidden away. Swedish psychiatrist Harold Fraterström even suggested that she might have been in a deep state of psychosis rather than actual hibernation. But that still didn't explain why she looked so remarkably young. Despite the skepticism, Carolina went on to lead a content and ordinary life until her passing in 1950 at the age of 88. She always insisted that her story was true, taking any secrets she had to the grave with her. We're left to wonder what really happened to Carolina Olsson. Was Olsson suffering from a particularly extraordinary case of any syndrome? How do we explain her ability to wake up without any major health effects, or her lack of aging during her ordeal? These questions may never be answered, and the case of the Swedish Sleeping Beauty remains a mysterious historical oddity and a potential medical marvel.